You guys know what it's like when you have a great book that you're super excited about and you're really pumped about the story and you're just so attached to those characters, and then you hear that somebody's going to make a movie about it and you're so excited. You run to the theater, you grab your popcorn, you sit down, and the movie sucks.
Then you come out saying, I read the books. I read the books.
The books were better. That's the thing. That's what everybody says when they walk in. You hear it more often than not. The books were better. That movie just didn't capture the essence of the books.
Or that HBO show.
That's
in more recent cases.
Yes. Or the Netflix series. There you go. All right. Hey, guys. Welcome back to my channel. I, of course, am Warrior Woman 91, and you are watching You Got It. So this week, I have brought back one of your favorite guests. Actually, it's one of my favorite guests because he's one of my good friends. He's one of my good friends, and this gives me a excellent opportunity to get to talk to him because I don't get to talk to him that often. So, Donovan Fowler, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always an honor, and I'm actually really excited to delve into this topic because I am not very well read, but I am fairly well watched when it comes to content. But it made me sit down and I had to ask myself, how many books adapted into movies have I actually read and watched? Yeah. So I had to do some self-reflection on this one.
Well, I'm glad that I made you think because I think that's kind of my goal in life is to make people think. So
it only happens once in a while, me thinking. So and when I do, I get sick. So you can't hit me with this too many. You can't hit me with this too often. This is why
I don't have you on the show very often because every time it just makes you, it just sends you into the abyss of disease and coronavirus and all the rest of it. So. All right. So you guys know what it's like when you have a great book that you're super excited about and you're really pumped about the story and you're just so attached to those characters. And then you hear that somebody's going to make a movie about it and you're so excited. You run to the theater, you grab your popcorn, you sit down, and the movie sucks.
Yeah. So and you come out saying, I read the books. I read the books.
The books were better. That's the thing. That's what everybody says when they walk in. You hear it more often than not. The books were better. That movie just didn't capture the essence of the books.
Or that HBO show. In more recent cases.
Yes. Or the Netflix series. There you go. So that's kind of what I want to touch on today. But before we get to like the kind of negative side of it, I did want to touch on there's a lot of books that have translated well into movies. So I wanted to kick it over to you. You can kind of kick it off and say, here's some of the books that have actually done well when they try to translate it into a movie.
Okay, so what'd you say?
Or a TV show.
Or a TV show. I'm gonna stick to movies.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been television shows. In fact, one pops to mind immediately, but we'll just stick to movies right now. So like I said, I had to actually sit down. I made a rule for myself. I was only going to stick to books that I had actually read and that were made into movies I had seen. But I do have honorable mentions of movies that turned out really well that people have either told me were good books or seem to have just adapted well. But to start off, I mean, obviously, I'm going to go through the top 5 here. I guess I'll go from the bottom to the top here. So Hunt for the Red October is a Tom Clancy novel, and it's probably, I don't know exactly if it's the most famous. I think it might have been the second Jack Ryan novel, but it's one of the more famous Jack Ryan novels. And I actually think it might be more famous because of the movie. I think it was famous when it was published, but they made it into a movie. John McTiernan, who directed Die Hard, made it into a feature film with Sean Connery and Alec Baldwin. And Alec Baldwin does a really good job playing Jack Ryan. He actually encapsulates that character pretty well. I'm almost going to venture to say that Alec Baldwin might be the best Jack Ryan to put to the screen. John Krasinski was pretty good. And Harrison Ford is good, but he's just a little bit different. But anyways, Hunt for the Red October is an awesome like submarine movie. It just really the casting is great. The whole opening of like they're all talking Russian, but then you realize that Sean Connery's not going to speak Russian throughout the entire movie, and he's definitely not going to speak in a Russian accent because he's got that that Scottish. But they do a great job of transitioning out of that. And anyways, there's a lot of clever stuff happening. And having read the book, I realized like there's a lot of stuff that I think it's been a while since I've read the book, but I'm pretty sure they were pretty faithful in the story itself. But they really they do a great job of linking Ryan and Ramius, the Sean Connery character, together in a cool dynamic that just makes it a very cool kind of almost, I dare I say, buddy film without really ever like them meeting until the third act. But like it's like they have this weird companionship going on throughout the movie that is very distant. Anyway, so that would be probably the bottom of my list just because that was like kind of an afterthought. Do you want me to keep going or do you want to trade off?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I would say to keep with the nautical theme of things, Master and Commander is another one. I mean, I think we talked about that. That's like one of my all-time favorite movies to begin with. And I really enjoy that movie just because of its like, it plays out like a novel brought to screen, but in the best way. Like a lot of people complain that it's long and that, its pacing is kind of that way. But honestly, like they took, I haven't read all the books in the Master and Commander series, but I have read the one that it brings its title from. And I know that what they did was, this is a good example of like, they took a series of books and they took kind of the best aspects of the longer arc across the books and they combined it into one movie. And it just comes together in a really like, once again, like really good relationship dynamic between Paul Bettany and Jack Aubrey, Russell Crowe's character. And,
great.
What'd you say?
Paul Bettany's great.
Yeah, Paul Bettany is fantastic. And like, it's actually my favorite Paul Bettany performance. And it's actually my favorite Russell Crowe performance as well, which I'm a big fan of Gladiator, but like Jack Aubrey, you kind of get a sense that like he comes off as much more literary than cinematic. And when I say that, I'm talking positively, like his character, like there's a lot implied about the character. Like he's a tough guy, but he has, he has the ability, like he will relax with the cello at the end of the day. He has this like weird scarring around his ear that's like, very like, it's not over the top, it's very like, just like, it's almost like that, just missing like little bits of his ear. And you never know what that's from. It's never mentioned, but you're just like, oh yeah, okay, this is like a seafaring, like this is a guy he's been at sea his entire life. So there's when I say literary, I mean like there's just so much history built into the characters and into the ship and into the conflict that like you almost sort of take it for granted in the best way. And you're kind of just right at home. So I'd highly recommend that movie and the book. The books are fantastic. They're like some of the best historical fiction. Like I said, I haven't read all of them, but my brother is a huge fan. Further going into it, I would say Jurassic Park is one of those that I read when my sister used to read me the Jurassic Park novels because I grew up terrified of Jurassic Park, which didn't make any sense. Like, what did I really think a velociraptor was hiding from me in my bathroom, like in the middle of the night? Like, what on earth? Like, I like it ignited such a terror in me. And the books were in many ways way more terrifying because, or at least that first book, because a lot of it's different. If you read the book, the movie is not necessarily in lockstep with how it happens in the book. And but still, Michael Crichton does such a it's difficult because like it really is one of those instances of and like Tom Clancy's work I kind of hold in this regard too, whereas like you almost view the book and the movie separately, you know, and like you're happy for that because with Jurassic Park, what Steven Spielberg did was he just made it super cinematic, you know, and opened up a whole new, like, I mean, really a whole new era of filmmaking with Jurassic Park, like 90s, like the like that, was it 92?
93, I think.
Yeah, 93. It really, like, that was like the kind of watershed moment for effects in the 90s. And anyways, so but also just like the fact that like Spielberg was able to adapt the characters to have like much more of a concise arc, and to you know, even just everybody is enough in that movie. Like you never really get a sense that you're getting too much of one character and not enough of another. Like Molden the hunter, who you see a lot of in the book, and I think actually survives the book. Like he,
okay, so yeah, he got killed in the movie, or it's implied that he gets killed.
Clever. Yeah, he gets taken out by the raptors, but in the movie, well, yeah, in the movie, but different characters, I think, in the book and the movie. But in the movie, it's like you're like, oh, I want to see more of that guy, but at the same time, I kind of don't, because so much mystery about him. Once again, it's like there's like stuff baked into his character where you're like, oh yeah, like this guy could have a completely different movie about him hunting on the Serengeti or something.
Yeah.
Very Hemingway. But so yeah, Jurassic Park is tops. I would definitely also throw in there, I'm gonna just add that Jaws is kind of in the same area as Jurassic Park, and that in high school I picked up a novel, not the novelization, the novel Jaws, because I was curious. And Peter Benchley wrote that before the movie, obviously. Like that was what got the movie made, was that he wrote the book. And it was weird because there's a lot of stuff in that book that isn't quite, it's just sort of trashy. Like what's Hooper, Richard Dreyfuss's character has an affair with the chief's wife, chief's wife. And there's like sex scenes and stuff in the book, and like it was sort of like, oh, this is weird. And what Spielberg once again had the right idea in that he realized that he didn't need any extra conflict. Like he didn't need Hooper and the chief, Brody, to be fighting about the wife when they were out on the ship, and he knew that would be super divisive and not good. So he decided, let's just make it all about the shark. Also, that whole you know, adapting the ending to be like the compressed air tank instead of like, I think in the original book it's like very like Captain Ahab, Moby Dick, like when it gets dragged down to depth, and then the air tank explodes when it reaches a certain depth. But in the movie they're like much more clever about it, in that like the chief has to be super proactive and actually shooting the air tank and exploding the shark.
Just to jump in there, I have to say I was slightly disappointed when I saw Jaws, because I'd had it built up so much, and then I saw it, I don't know, maybe a couple years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't see it like when I was younger, or when the technology was a little bit closer to the era that it was made. And so when I saw it, I was like, I'm not scared. This is boring. This is
wow. See, that's interesting. I mean, well,
it's I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that it was overhyped for me, and so it was a disappointment to me because of how it was hyped.
But I think I do think that that's what everybody has to admit, is like, if you're seeing these things, like somebody recently, I think Bill Maher, who I wouldn't necessarily hold up there, is like the like the voice on cinema, but he was pointing out that like if you show Hitchcock to like kids these days, like the Zoomers, like most likely they're not going to be super impressed. Like they're not going to get it. You have to you either reach a certain age or you understand what's going on. Like so many of the effects and stuff, like I feel like very few effects end up aging well. And even looking at like how miniatures were done or like rear screen projection, like people at the time bought it because they were in a different era of entertainment.
Yeah.
Whereas now we have become more sophisticated, for better or for worse. And now it's like you have to almost like make the leap in your mind. And with, speaking of leaps, when the shark like flops onto the boat and like in the last Battle of Jaws, that part was always tricky
that I was specifically
because well, and what sucks about it is because those great white sharks in South Africa actually like do full on like flips out of the water. Like you see the footage of them like just shooting up out of the water and then coming down and diving back in. That in the concept art is originally what they wanted, but the shark was so damn hard to maneuver that they it was basically just like you know. So
that's the scene where I was like, I'm supposed to be scared here, but I'm not. What is wrong with
but I think the one thing about that is it makes you realize, because I watched Aliens, and this is the last, I'm going to get off on this tangent because I should finish up, but I watched Aliens just recently this last weekend, and it made me realize that like even that I can spot some of the effects, the holes in the effects.
Yeah.
I can see when it's a guy in a suit. I can see, when the rear projection is being used, despite the fact that it's great rear projection, and I can definitely see when miniatures are being employed. But at the end of the day, the story is so good in that movie, and the pacing and the editing, it's technically brilliant, and also on a story level, it's very well done. And with Jaws, I feel like it's similar in the sense of like editing, the character dynamics. Quint, like I said, like Quint is almost like a precursor to Molden. He's better, but he's just that guy who you're like, wow, like I just want to study you. Like you've got this like and actually one of the best parts of that entire movie is that when Quint is talking about the USS Indianapolis, and no flashbacks, no sound effects or anything like none of this, like it's just him telling a ghost story, around a campfire basically. And it's terrifying. It's like more terrifying than a lot of the stuff in the movie, because it happened, and anybody caught out in the middle of the ocean is going to be dealing with what he's talking about, Okay, so cracking on Green Dolphin Street. There's is the movie called Green Dolphin Street? Shoot. Wait a minute. Well, there's a book called Green Dolphin Street. Actually, this is making me look bad because now I can't really say this. But it's been a while since I've seen the movie, because the movie is really epic. But it's a movie with Lana Turner, and I don't remember the lead actor's name. It'll come to me. He was also in Shane, not Alan Ladd, but the other guy. But anyways, there's a movie called Green Dolphin Street that was made off of, it's called Green Dolphin Street. That was made off of a book, and it's a long and winding kind of romantic epic. But the movie is great. It's really hard to explain because there's just so many like storylines and stuff weaving together. But it's a good example of like taking like three storylines or three or four storylines of characters and really just weaving them in such a divine way that's really just it's very impactful, and I love it. The book is just so romantic in the way that like it's the kind of poignant moments that just always stick with me, that I always want to see made into like cinematic moments. Like the movie was made, I think, in 1947, so you're not going to get as much of that, but like it's very like just, like Lawrence of Arabia, standing on like the train, like Scarlett and her dad looking out over Tara and Gone with the Wind, just like those poignant like moments that just image meets emotion and you just get it. And in the case of Green Dolphin Street, there's several moments where I was just like, wow, that's like just so beautiful, and like I'd love to see that actually brought to screen.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the movie does that in many ways, but I've always envisioned like a mini series for that because it is sort of an epic.
Mm-hmm.
So the last on my list and at the top of my list is one that you and I have talked about on occasion, and it is Tale of Two Cities with
Yes.
Ronald Colman.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and it's just out of all. I mean, like once again, I guess Green Dolphin Street was a good precursor because this has one of those moments that just like I'm not ashamed to say it just brings tears to my eyes every time I watch it.
Yeah.
And the movie itself is not perfect. Like there's some pacing and like stuff that there's definitely it's that 1930s like book to movie syndrome of like we're gonna give people kind of what they want. We're going to give them the full thing. And they do a pretty good, it's still pretty good. It's just like in today's, I would say if you were to adapt it today, you'd probably tighten up certain things.
Yeah.
Because it in some respects, sometimes it comes off a little bit more of a stage play than like, such a big cinematic experience, even though it still has that. But Ronald Colman is just such a good Sidney Carton. Like he's just, and it's not the kind of Sidney Carton I would have even envisioned actually. Like it's different, but it's clever and it's emotional, and he's he's a wastrel, but he's likable, and like it's really what the character is supposed to be, like very very Christian in origin, and just like there's just that scene at the end, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but like between he and the seamstress where they're just waiting for the guillotine, and they kiss, like they end up kissing like on the lips, and these are like two strangers basically, but like he basically realizes that this is like that his whole entire life is led up to like this companionship, and that it's in many ways like symbolic of even the new redemption that he's found through saving the family that now is being sent back to England, that he's there to take the place of Charles Darnay. It's symbolic of that, and it's just like there's just a part where he says, like, I think he says God bless you, and then he kisses her on the lips, and then she goes up, and then he goes
and
up.
He has to watch her too.
Yeah. So it's so that's definitely, and I mean the book is just my favorite literary classic of all time.
So I kind of feel like what you feel like when you walk into class when you're in high school or college and you realize you read the wrong book. I went, and I'm so proud and I'm so excited, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because I went and watched A Tale of Two Cities, but I watched the wrong one. I watched the one with Chris Sarandon from the 80s.
Oh. No. Wait. Who was in it? Who was in the 80s version?
Chris Sarandon. He actually plays both Darnay and Sidney Carton.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting way of going about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're supposed to be like twin-like.
Yeah. So that's my first one.
Was it distracting that they had the same character or the same actor playing both of them?
I thought that they got like actual twins. I didn't realize it was Chris Sarandon, first of all, because I'm just not as familiar with.
I don't even know that actor.
He's the guy who plays Prince Humperdinck in
oh man.
Princess Bride. Wow. Yeah, he's that guy. Anyway, so he does a fantastic job. I forced my dad to watch it. He's like, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch this. Then the other day he comes up to me. He says, can you buy me that movie for my birthday? I would like to have it on DVD to be part of my collection.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's a really good adaptation, but now I'm going to have to go and watch the 1930s version so that I'm completely up to speed here. But I really liked how they handled those two characters, because they did make the one thing that I feel like they really developed Sidney Carton, because he is the hero of the book, and almost to the detriment of Darnay, because he's just kind of, I don't know, this like he's too good of a character.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, he is the like the what's the word, like the moral example of what Sidney Carton should have been,
and what he wishes
himself.
He was. Yeah,
what he wishes he was. Yeah, it's so tragic in the beginning when they talk about that like that Carton is self-aware enough to realize that that he really, like, one of the reasons he doesn't really like Darnay is because he sees him as a mere reflection of what he'll never really be. Yeah, it's really interesting.
That brings to mind there's a really fantastic, hilarious. It's not meant to be hilarious, but there's this scene. I don't know if you've seen the 1980 version.
I haven't seen the 19. I'm gonna have to check this out now.
I don't know if you have Amazon Prime. It's on Amazon Prime right now, so you can watch it.
Was it like a TV movie?
Yeah, it was a TV
movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this scene because, again, Chris Sarandon plays Darnay and Carton. So there's this scene. It's on the wedding night between Darnay and Lucy, and they're sitting in bed and they're talking about Sidney Carton and how he's in love with her and all the rest of it. And I'm just like, but he's there. He's
See, that's why if I were to adapt it, I don't think I'd do the one actor playing both, because
it takes away from one of the characters. One of the characters is going to give. Fortunately, it was Darnay in this version, and Carton was fantastic. He's just utterly phenomenal. But Darnay was a little bit of a weaker character, and then you set yourself up for scenes like that where they're like, yes, he's in love with you, and I'm like, but he's there.
Yeah, that is interesting. That is kind of but Darnay is sort of that way in the book too. That's kind of one of the bigger, maybe a little bit of a weakness in it, is that Carton and Lucy have well, actually, I shouldn't undercut Darnay like that in the book, because he is better in the book. Yeah. But the problem is that that's why it's difficult on screen. Adaptation is so difficult because you can't really give him his due screen time, because Carton
is the one you have to devote all of the energy to.
But I do think there's a way, and there is a way, but most of the adaptations have not done it. There's a good Wishbone adaptation too.
Yes.
I don't know. That Wishbone, the guy who plays Sidney Carton in the Wishbone episode, is really good, actually.
Yeah.
His final kind of soliloquy in the prison cell, it was always one of the most dramatic and one of my most memorable Wishbone moments. After school.
Wishbone is how I became cultured as a child.
No, I would not like have read any of these books if it weren't for Wishbone.
No, I mean, like, there's so many different. What's the book? We're going completely on a tangent.
I know.
There's a book. It's about that lady who like lives in her wedding dress for like the rest.
It's Great Expectations, right? Is that Great Expectations?
I don't know.
It's Dickens, and I think it's Great Expectations.
Okay. I haven't read the book yet, but the only reason I know about it is because of the Wishbone episode, and because it was so creepy how they put that scene together. Her dress gets lit on fire, and I'm like, this is a kid's show, you guys.
I know. Yeah, I was always like, I was so into the drama of it, and it's so ridiculous because it's a little dog, but there were some like truly scary moments and stuff. I was like, I was a little freaked out by
the Frankenstein episode. I was watching it as an adult, and I was like, how did my parents let me watch this?
I know. Red Badge of Courage too.
Yeah. I'm gonna go home and watch Wishbone when I get home. They're all on YouTube.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can look them up.
But that was my number one as well. A Tale of Two Cities, I thought was fantastically adapted in my version of the movie that I watched, and now I'm gonna have to go watch yours. But I thought it was really well done. The one complaint I do have is they cut off, because at the end of the book there's like, and then they get home, and then they have a child, and they name him Sydney, and then they teach him about what he did, and all that. They cut all of that out of the movie, and they just have his head gets cut off, and then that's how it ends.
But I think I'll be curious to know how you think, because we're gonna have to watch the next time we do a podcast. We'll do an update, because we'll watch the separates, because it is similar in the version that I watched.
Okay.
So here's the thing. In the book, I actually do think it ends with Sidney Carton dying.
Yeah,
it's his imagination of what that looks like.
Yeah.
That that is running through his head when he says it's a far, far better thing than I've ever done. It's a far, far better thing. Yeah, it's a far, far better rest. To quote Joe Biden, you know the thing. Whenever I try to, I feel like I can relate to that. Whenever I try to quote books, I always end up just like, you know the thing.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait until you're old, Donovan, because you're going to end up like Joe Biden.
Oh boy! Hopefully,
I mean,
we won't.
You turned 30, I think, last year.
I'm in the as I said recently to a friend, I'm in the autumn years of my life. But as you can clearly tell from my respiratory things, but yes, it would be interesting to do like an adaptation where there was like where that was playing out in his head.
Yeah.
Up to the guillotine.
Yeah.
But I do like sticking with Sidney and having it end with Sidney. But that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I really haven't. I never really gave it a whole lot of thought that it would be.
It's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons why I think the book was so charming to me, because we got a little bit of that. That kind of it helped us to understand why this was worth it for him to do this. Yeah. And
well,
it's not to say it takes it away in just kind of cutting it off, but it's just nice for the audience to kind of have, this is the grander purpose of why this was so important for him to do.
Well, it's almost like the manifestation of like his resurrection. Because he's supposed to be Christ-like, obviously he dies and that he's going on to, eternal life.
Yeah.
But seeing the little boy and seeing the family, reunited and living in peace is like, it was the catastrophe of the sacrifice that ended up taking place. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's my number one. I'm gonna kind of circle back and go down my list of the top ones, but Lord of the Rings, obviously we talk about every episode, but I can't do an episode like this talking about books to movies that have been successful and not talk about Lord of the Rings. But I won't spend too much time on that because we've talked about it a lot.
I didn't put it on my list because I'm ashamed to say, I'm going to be honest. I think I've said this before. I haven't actually read the books. I think I read Fellowship.
What is wrong with you?
I know. Like I said, like if it weren't for Wishbone, I probably wouldn't have read anything. I honestly, I was such a terrible reader as a kid. I remember kids were blowing through the Harry Potter books and the Lord of the Rings books, and I just couldn't do it. But I am going to do it. It's on my list. Lord of the
Rings is a commitment. I've read through them now twice, all the way through. Once when I was 14, and once I just now finished Return of the King for the second time, like last year sometime. Actually, a mutual friend of ours was going through my books and was like, "You're still reading The Two Towers?" But yeah, it's a hard book to read, and I should say it's a hard 3 books to read, but it was meant to be one book, and so it does require
because it's like a history.
It's like reading a history book with some like fictional narrative going through it. So
are you so speaking of Lord of the Rings, what would you say out of what they cut out of the Lord of the Rings, or what they did to Lord of the Rings on screen? Because I've heard people say the Lord of the Rings on screen is great, but it's not books.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't think that there's any way that you could take Lord of the Rings, the books, and actually translate it exactly onto the screen, unless maybe it was a TV series, and then you're not getting the same I don't know, impact with a TV series that you would
Yeah.
with a movie. I think that of the three, the one that's the closest to the book is The Fellowship of the Ring. They just cut out a lot of the like fluff, and extra
Tom
things.
Bombadil. I think
Yes,
we all
exactly.
agree. I'm starting a petition. You and I need to start a petition to get Tom Bombadil his own Netflix movie.
Oh my gosh, that'd be the most boring thing. That'll be when you do read The Fellowship of the Ring, you're gonna understand why. It's like 3 chapters of
Oh,
just
yeah.
nothing. I
It's
can't
just 3
stand it.
chapters of good living. It's basically just like,
Yes.
oh, we found this really chill guy in the woods,
Yeah.
and he takes care of the trees and stuff, and
Yeah.
that's
There's some there's one scary part that they did cut out from that when the hobbits get captured by the Barrow Downs or something. Or
the
like
trees.
no, the Barrow Whites. They get captured by the trees, then they get saved, then they get captured by these like creatures that put spells on them and lock them in their caves, and Tom Bombadil has to save them again. But it's this
Okay.
complete detour that doesn't affect anything outside
Yeah.
of that. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like Tolkien was like, "Here's a short story. I'm just going to stick in here
Right.
for."
Here's an adventure within an adventure.
Exactly, that's what it is. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I get of the three, the first book and the first movie are the ones that mirror each other the most. The other two, not so much, but I think they still retain the essence and the same
Yeah.
like emotional impact that you would get from either one. I cried at the end of reading the book of Return of the King. I didn't cry over the movie, but you still get that same impact.
Man, I was crying so hard when I saw the movie as a kid
Oh
because
my
I didn't
God.
know how it was going to end because I hadn't read the book.
Right.
And I remember I saw an old man crying a few
Mhm.
rows in front of me, and I was just like, like,
Man, I promise.
yeah. But wait, would you say okay? So you're what's your favorite out of the? Would you say Fellowship is your favorite?
I think Fellowship is the most accurate.
Yeah.
Of the books, I think The Return of the King is the best. Of the
Okay.
movies, I think The Fellowship of the Ring is the best.
Yeah, Fellowship is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much my commentary on Lord of the Rings. Just kind of running through a couple of
Talk
others.
about the Hobbit later.
Yeah. A couple of others that I thought were good. I think The Wizard of Oz, again, a great book that translated into a movie is extremely different than what the book actually is. But I think obviously
Silver Slippers, I think, in the book as
Yeah,
opposed to Ruby
yeah.
Slippers, right?
Yeah, and that's like the most minor of details that got changed. Like the entire.
That's why I don't watch the movie. I'm like screw this. Those slippers should have been silver. We all know. We all know it was supposed to represent something with the Federal Reserve and our silver
Oh my gosh.
things or whatever.
But the thing is, like, I think it's like what you were saying earlier of viewing the book and the movie as separate entities.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I feel about The Wizard of Oz, because
Yes.
the movie I have an emotional attachment to because it's like sentimental and it reminds me of my childhood, and the
Well,
book.
it's such a cinematic achievement too.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just like it's of that era of cinema that like you're never like even though people have like kind of tried to remake Wizard of Oz, you're
Yeah.
never gonna do it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, take a hike.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to talk about Return to Oz after this too.
I don't even know which one that is. I just know that there was that one that Sam Raimi did, and then I know there was like a sci-fi miniseries. It's so. Oh wait, Return
to Oz is that one from the 80s that Disney put out.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then there's The Wiz, which is basically Wizard of Oz with black people, I think. Right?
I don't know. I've not heard of this at all.
It might just be Wizard of Oz for black people.
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to bring up now that we've gone down the rabbit trail, I'm going to bring it up. I think Return to Oz is a fantastic adaptation of a book that didn't exist. So what happened? So in the 80s, they thought, okay, we're going to make a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, and we are going to. So basically, what they did was they took elements out of the 3 sequel books that were actually written by the same author.
Yeah, Franco's mom.
They took elements from each of those 3 books, shoved them into a movie, and made this movie into this creepy horror film that is just amazing and meant for kids. And so you've got this witch that's like headless, and she switches her heads, and she's like chasing Dorothy without her head, and the heads in the room are all screaming. And I love this. I actually read the novelization of the movie before I saw the movie, and I loved it as a kid. I was like, this is the most freaking scary thing I've ever read, and I shouldn't be reading it, but it's amazing.
The 80s was a very weird time for fantasy.
Yeah.
And it was very weird, like, tones that were being struck. Like, very scary stuff.
Yeah.
Like, look at a lot of the fantasy that's coming out of the 80s, like Willow and, like, Legend, and, like, that's what I'm hearing, like, from this, is, like, stuff that I would have stayed away from as a kid. Because I was like, I don't really, like, I don't want to go there. I'll stick with, like, action movies and war, like, stuff that is, like, real world, like, that I can deal with. But that's interesting. I'll have to. I bet it's on Disney Plus.
It is on Disney Plus. You'll have to watch it. It's so dark, and it's so scary, and it's pretty much exactly what I always wanted to see as a kid.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't like get. I'm just gonna throw. It doesn't get like demonically dark. It's not like that kind of dark. It's just like dark in the sense of it's gritty and it's real, versus this. You know, nowadays you watch kids shows or you see a movie targeted at kids and it's just a bunch of fart jokes. And that just never appealed to me as a kid. I wanted this, and I still, as an adult, you know, I don't want to watch The Exorcist. I don't want to watch all that kind of gory, like really, really dark stuff. I do want to see something that's like gritty and
kind of like fantasy, like horror, kind of like, you know, like, that kind of genre of.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's I mean, that is kind of, I mean, that's how fairy tales, I think, were originally envisioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is basically something that would, like, this is like an alternate universe kind of thing of how it might play out in our real world if good and evil were personified in certain ways.
Yeah. So that's another one of my examples. And then just to run through real quick, a couple of others. Psycho obviously was a novel before it became the movie.
Oh, and I guess it was.
I have not read the novel, but I'm throwing it in there just because it was a novel before it was a movie, and I think the movie is just phenomenal. I actually was scared the first couple of times I watched it, and I only watched it within the past year for the first time. So
no way. Really?
Now listen, here's the best part. This is how like dense I was and how out of touch I was about this movie. I thought it was Norman the whole time. I thought it was not Norman. I thought it was the mother, I should say.
Oh,
I thought the mother was real. I thought that she was the one doing all the stabbings. I thought, and I did not realize, I didn't believe that it was Norman until the wig came off.
So you never knew the twist?
I had no idea. And so it was a fantastic way to watch the movie.
Maybe you are like the person that they should be testing, like whether movies are still good on. Like is it Kelly approved? Okay. Like, yeah.
But it was amazing because I wasn't scared of the shower scene. I did jump at the scene where the guy gets stabbed on the stairs, even though
that always disturbed me because she follows him down, he follows him down to the bottom and then keeps stabbing him.
Yeah.
Like it was like that really, that's the kind of stuff that creeps me out more.
Yeah. I mean, it's super gory, and then also the kind of the camera angle is coming down from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And you can see Mother in the corner, you can see, and it still scares you. You still jump.
It's so like, oh wait, she shouldn't be there. What?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then the music cue, and it's genius. It really is.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. And then the part that actually did scare me, that I was actually like, oh my gosh, I'm super creeped out, was when Norman, as I now understand, but I didn't think it was Norman. I thought it was the mother. I thought the real mother had shown up at the door with the knife and was so excited and has this gigantic smile on his face.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the thing that creeped me out, the big smile on his face. He's so excited to come and kill this person. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to die. Anyway, so that's a great example.
You should watch Gus Van Sant shot for shot remake. We should do one of remakes.
Yes.
And we should review that one because in that one Vince Vaughn plays Norman Bates, and it's a shot for shot remake by the director of Good Will Hunting of Psycho, and it's not good.
Oh boy. It sounds like a movie night. We'll watch The Room and we'll watch that.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
So then the final books I wanted to throw in there that I thought were great movies were The Hunger Games and Catching Fire, not Mockingjay. It's on the other list. It's on the naughty list.
Mockingjay. Sorry, somebody's like causing car alarms to go on outside my window, and I'm just like, shut up! Like I'm trying to do a podcast here. My street has become a weird cacophony of noises lately. Okay, so wait, you said
Hunger Games and Catching Fire.
Oh yeah, okay. So I really enjoyed the first Hunger Games. My sister and all the women in my family read those books. And then what was the deal? The second one I thought was good. Catching Fire was good. But yeah, the third one I thought it's like the splitting it into two parts is always a mistake.
Yes.
And I just felt like I did like the song she sang at the end of the third one, but I didn't really think it had a very good ending. It lacked something.
I don't know if you've read the books, but I loved the first two books. I burned through those two books, and then because I was a broke college student at the time, and I was like, I gotta get the third one. I'm waiting for the library book to come in. I've ordered it from the library. It's coming. And then I was like, I'm buying it. I am going, this was a deal for me to spend money. And so I read the third one, and I was just completely emotionally destroyed because I think the third book is actually, this is going to sound sacrilegious, but I think it's a mistake because I think that the way the first two were set up to then take the characters to rock bottom, I think it was an emotional tragedy, but I think that it made it so that it was unsatisfying.
Interesting.
And even though at the end of the book, I thought it was really, again, that's the song you referenced is at the end of the book, and I was like drenched in tears by the end of that book. It was so emotionally devastating, but I just thought it was unfortunate that that Suzanne Collins made those first two in such a way that even though they had tragedy in them and they had drama, they didn't destroy the characters to that point that you were just completely, I don't know, disenfranchised with it. And that's kind of the way the third one felt. And that translated again then into the movies. Yeah. So already you're working with something that's going to be disappointing, and then they split it. And so all of anything that was exciting in the books just kind of got, I don't know, messed up.
I mean, Lord of the Rings is a great example of how to handle a trilogy in that Two Towers stands on its own, but leaves the road open for the third movie, but it has a definitive ending.
It does, yeah.
Whereas Catching Fire is a good movie, but it sort of ends, it tries to end like Empire Strikes Back while also just being like a cliffhanger ending, and it just doesn't work. It's just not the same. But
I think there were elements from, again, having read the books, I think there were elements from the book that made it make more sense. And so the ending does come off a little bit weaker in the movie because they didn't spend enough time.
Well, especially with the third one just being such a disappointment overall.
Yeah.
But is that your list, or are you done?
Yeah, that's my list. We can kind of talk about the ones that were flops. I know you wanted to talk about The Hobbit. I wanted to talk about The Hobbit as well.
So I'm just going to read out some honorable mentions really fast, and I won't get into these, but these are books that either I've read and been made into movies, or I haven't read. That's why they're on honorable mention. But of course, Lord of the Rings, we've talked about that. Last of the Mohicans. Many people in my family have read that book, and it's different from the movie, but it sounds like the movie and the book have virtues that are, specific to each. But Last of the Mohicans is such a great movie, especially when you consider Michael Mann directed it, who is like typically just cops and robbers, and like it's completely outside of his genre. Very odd for him to do that, but he just did a fantastic job with that movie. Of Mice and Men, I think the Gary Sinise version of Mice and Men is a great adaptation. Gone with the Wind, of course, is just such a cinematic achievement that you can't you can't not acknowledge it.
I'm gonna have to talk to you about that movie because I'm still creeped out by that movie
Oh, really?
Because of the rape scene. It bothers me to this day.
Oh, with Rhett Butler.
Yes.
When he carries her up the stairs.
Yes.
It scared the crap out of me. You're gonna get me into like hot water because you're gonna make me sound like
we'll talk about that scene after.
I'm sure I'll write you an essay on that scene. It'll be like one sentence. It faded to black. We don't know what happened.
Yeah, sure we don't.
Let's put Rhett Butler on trial. Goodbye, Mr. Chips. Mm-hmm. There's a movie of that from I think it's the 1940s with Robert Donat and Greer Garson, and that is just it's such a heart-wrenching book and such a heart-wrenching movie. So those are my honorable mentions. Speaking of movies that were split into different parts that didn't deserve to be split into different parts, The Hobbit. Yes. This was a trend, and it was a trend with young adult novels. It's funny because like you had like the Insurgent series, you had I don't know, it was just such a thing like throughout the 2010s to split the movies, like books, into two movies. And it was such a cash grab and so stupid. And it was, the most obvious case of it is with The Hobbit. Because originally The Hobbit was thought up as a 2-movie deal with Guillermo del Toro. Mm-hmm. And that at least made some sense because it seemed like maybe they wanted to like treat the Battle of the Five Armies as its own thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I've read the book, and to me, I've always held that the Lord of the Rings is an epic. That's why it's 3, and The Hobbit is a journey, I don't think Bilbo is even really around for the Battle of the Five Armies.
No, he passes out right at the beginning.
Yeah, okay, so like
he doesn't even experience it.
See, that's the easiest. Like, if I were a producer, I'd be like, oh, great, okay, we don't have to film the Battle of the Five Armies.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah, let's stick to the dragon. Like, let's stick to like the Beowulf aspect of this. But I mean, the biggest problem is that Peter Jackson. I don't want to just dump on Peter Jackson because I know he's an easy target for this. But I know that there was a lot of different stuff going on with New Zealand's film commission and their film industry at the time. They threw a lot of money at him and sped up the schedule. Mm-hmm. And I think he basically was just like, okay, well, I don't have enough time to actually flesh this out, so I'm just going to go default and do what works before. Yeah. And he basically tried to remake Lord of the Rings.
I also think he didn't really want to make this one because originally they had a different director, and then he was having like severe health problems, and he lost a ton of weight and all of that, and then they ended up bringing him on. And
was Peter Jackson having severe health problems?
Yeah, he was like hospitalized for a while. But
I didn't know that. I know he lost a ton of weight, but I thought he had just gone on a diet.
No, it was because he had like some major surgery on something else. But that all just kind of led into him just not. I just don't think his heart was in it the way it was for Lord of the Rings, and I think he felt like he was kind of pressured into doing it. Yeah. This is actually really charitable of me because I was so mad at what happened with The Hobbit. I was so furious when I came out of that third movie. I was this is just an insult to me as an audience member.
I don't think I remember at the end of Desolation of Smaug, mm-hmm. I was just like, what?
What did we
seriously?
Like,
you're just gonna cut to black in the middle of the climax.
Yeah.
Like, this is so dumb. And honestly, this might be controversial. I don't think Martin Freeman was a very good Bilbo.
Wow.
I don't like Martin Freeman, to be completely honest with you. I find him to be an annoying little British man who people seem to like because of the Sherlock Holmes, the Sherlock series, which we could talk about the Sherlock series. That to me is not a very good adaptation of those books.
We're gonna need to do an entire episode now of all of Donovan's wrong opinions.
I was watching a movie recently with somebody, and Martin Freeman was in it, and I totally forgot what his name was. And I do this thing every once in a while where I'll forget like a name of an actor, and I'll force myself not to look it up on IMDb. And then like 3 hours later, I'll just be like, Morgan Freeman, Martin Freeman. No, but no, I don't like Martin Freeman. He came off as like, I feel like what's his name? Ian Holmes, Bilbo.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he was older.
Yeah.
So he may have been like a little bit wiser, but he came off a little less selfish, like, whereas like Martin Freeman's Bilbo comes off as sort of just being a selfish prick. Like, I understand like Bilbo's character is that he just wants to be left alone and wants to live his life. But this is where I actually think that the animated version is a better adaptation.
I 100% agree.
The animated version is very much like he doesn't really want a whole lot. He just wants to, he just wants to be comfortable and to be left alone and live his life the way he wants to live it. And, like he kind of has some empathy, like he kind of wants to help, but he's a little unsure of himself because he's a hobbit. And I think that's like a good, like, starting point for a hero. Whereas Martin Freeman, there's just way too many instances where it's like he was just a little too angry, and like I was just like, you're just kind of.
I can see that. Like I like Martin Freeman as an actor, so that might have, I don't know, clouded my judgment. But I can see where you're coming from on that, because I think that Bilbo was a little bit too crusty and a little bit too like. Yeah. I don't know. It was less childlike, because people forget that The Hobbit is a children's book. And I feel like they definitely were just kind of like, no, we're not going that direction. Either they didn't realize it was meant to be a book for kids, or they just decided we're not going to go in that direction. We're going to make it, this is going to be Lord of the Rings 2.0 basically. And so I definitely can see where you're coming from on that, even though I disagree with you about Martin Freeman.
I think John Krasinski should have been cast as Bilbo. I think that would have been better. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. He's a much better Jack Ryan.
That's actually a good leading off point, because another book that I think did very poorly as a live action film, but did well as a cartoon and even a direct to TV release, I think it was, is The Chronicles of Narnia, specifically The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is the one that always gets made and then the others never get finished. But I thought the Disney adaptation, the live action movie, was awful. And the reason for that is not because it wasn't visually stunning, but again, it was another case of they didn't want it to be a kid's show or a kid. They took like all of the childlike innocence out of it and just made it a bunch of angsty teenagers. I
don't know. Okay, so I did like the first one, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Disney live action version. I enjoyed the what you're talking about, like the visceralness of it. Like I enjoyed the visual, like kind of action, and like I thought it was cool that they did that. Some of the CGI is a little wonky, like the animals don't quite look as good as they really should, and there's a few shots where I'm like, oh yeah, like even at the time I was like, this definitely isn't Lord of the Rings. Yeah. But overall, I think I like that one, but I do think that it's lacking. Like it's once again, like it's no Fellowship. Like it's lacking, even though I haven't read the Fellowship, or I haven't read it in a long time, if I've ever read it. I haven't read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe either, but I kind of know the essence of what should be there, you know? And with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I got like maybe 3/4 of it, you know? I felt like they went more cinematic with it than what was originally like in the story. Like they kind of softened certain aspects of it. So yeah, but I do like that first one. The Prince Caspian, I remember trying to convince myself it was good. I was like, because it once again, it had some action in it and stuff. But I never really want to go back to it. It's very dull. Yeah. And then that third one, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, it was just like, oof, like this sucks. Like this is really bad.
Which is unfortunate because for a long time, Voyage of the Dawn Treader was my favorite of the series because that scene that they did not do justice to at all in that movie. It's been so long since I've even watched that movie, but the book, I remember reading it as, you know, I was like 11 or 12 years old, and I still remember being in shock because, again, I don't know, maybe I'm just like everything goes over my head when I read a book or watch a movie, but it was the same kind of situation like it was when I watched Psycho. There's a scene where Eustace goes to sleep in the dragon cave, and he wakes up, and there's a dragon claw on one side of him and a dragon claw on the other side of him, and he cannot figure out. And then when he moves his hand and the claw moves as he moves his hand, and then he moves his other hand and the claw moves, and he can't figure out there's a dragon on either side of him now. And then he starts running out of the cave to get away from them, but then he realizes he's running on all fours. Right. And this entire time, again, I'm 11 or 12 years old. I'm like, he's being chased by dragons. I could not figure out that he was the dragon until he looks over the edge of the pool and sees his face, and he is the dragon.
That was
Yeah, they didn't do that in the movie.
That was the original twist ending to The Sixth Sense, was that Bruce Willis found out he had been turned into a dragon instead of finding out that he was dead. No, oh man, I just remember in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which actually I've been diving a little bit more into C.S. Lewis, so who knows? By the next time we do a podcast, I might have read half of one of his books, but I read the Screwtape Letters like 3 times recently, so I'm definitely getting back into it. But the kid who plays Eustace in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, he's not a bad actor. I've seen him in other stuff where he is good, and I don't know where I saw him where he was great, but I do think that he did have a performance at one point where I was like, oh wow, that was really good. But man, oh man, in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, he's just yelling for like 75 to 80% of the time, and you're just like, shut up. You looks like a mini Judi Dench, like like in a schoolboy's uniform, and it's just really irritating and really stupid. And I recently saw that movie was on HBO recently, and I was just like, nope. Watch it, but yeah, I do like the first one. I thought the first one was good, but I mean, I think Hollywood has always had a hard time with Chronicles of Narnia because it is so Christian.
Yes,
and a perfect example of this is, I don't think a lot of people know this, but I read this back in like 2004 when they were making when they were adapting. I read it in like some Catholic magazine where they talked about the fact that in the 90s the Hollywood had optioned the rights to Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and they were going to make it into like a modern retelling of it, but instead of the Blitz in World War II in London, it was going to be an earthquake in Los Angeles, and like the kids went to go stay with their aunt in Santa Clarita, and like they were going to fall into a swimming pool, and the swimming pool was going to take them to Narnia. And it was just like, yikes. Like, yeah, go ahead and cast the Power Rangers in that one.
Yeah. Why do people, I don't know what the mentality is. Okay, you've got this fantastic timeless piece of literature, but we can make it better by turning it into a swimming pool in the middle of Santa Clarita. I don't understand why people, I don't know if it's like hubris or something, but it just frustrates me. You've got these fantastic pieces of literature. Let's kind of respect the source material a little bit.
Right. I get the whole, like, let's bring a new twist to it or whatever. But, yeah, I say leave the classics alone, you know. And I'm always more interested in period pieces and stuff within the periods in which they're written.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some instances where you'll find, actually, Edward Norton recently did a movie called Motherless Brooklyn. Not a great movie. It's somewhere, you know, below the rungs of Chinatown and LA Confidential in terms of like detective movies.
Mm-hmm.
But the original book was originally written in the 90s. It was supposed to take place in the 90s. And he decided to take it back to the 1950s and set it there, which is kind of controversial because it probably would have been easier. Well, I don't know actually whether it would have been easier to do a 90s period piece, but basically it was just an interesting adaptation, adaptational decision. And then he added stuff from there. That wasn't terrible, but yeah, it is it's interesting to see what people do with this stuff.
So basically that's the end of all of my lists that I've got. I don't know if you have any.
Well, I was going to say, not sorry to cut you off. I got excited because I was thinking we should do like an episode. I don't know how close the original Disney cartoons are to your heart.
Oh, that'd be a great episode. Yeah.
Recently, I've just been marveling because my roommates, if they're hearing this right now, have heard me say this probably like over a dozen times. So like this is like I just keep telling people how disappointed I was in the Aladdin live action remake.
Yeah, I haven't been able to bring myself to see it. I've seen pieces of it and I was like, I'm gonna not watch that.
I'm a Guy Ritchie fan. I like Guy Ritchie. I like Aladdin. I was like, okay, it doesn't really look like he's gonna screw this up too bad. Like it's not gonna be the original, but like whatever. Disney Plus, I've been going back and rewatching the original cartoons, and then once in a while, maybe I'll venture into one of the live action ones, and I'm just amazed at how much better the originals are. Yeah. And I know people just love to harp on that, but it's true. It's like the live action Disney.
The live action basically takes all of the heart and soul out of the originals and then gives you this carbon copy, and it's just gross.
It's really bad, but we should we could even, I know the Mulan one is coming out this month. Who knows? Maybe we'll reconvene to talk about, like, to do an entire episode on that, because it would be really interesting to sort of dissect what makes those originals so good and what is missing from these new ones.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially because I do think that the Cinderella live action remake is actually good.
It's good, yeah.
It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, but like I thought that was a good one, and that was the only good one.
The Jungle Book was okay too. I actually Mulan. But I love the original Jungle Book, so it's like if anybody were ever to give me a choice, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll like get rid of the Jon Favreau one and just keep the cartoon. But the Mulan one I'm interested in because it actually looks like they shot it on real locations instead of like all, sets and like backlot sets and blue screen. But and it also looks like maybe they're resisting the urge to just go for this like musical carbon copy, and they're just like, okay, you know what? Let's just make it an action adventure movie and let's just do that. But I've lost so much faith. I thought that's what Aladdin was going to be. I thought, they're just going to inject Pirates of the Caribbean live action into what we love about the Aladdin cartoon.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case. So.
Yeah, well, that's actually a fantastic idea. We should reconvene after we both see the Mulan remake, and we'll find out whether that ends up being a good movie. But I just want to thank you, Donovan, for coming back on the show. I think people are really going to enjoy this episode. I always enjoy having you on the show, and it sounds like with all the ideas you have for upcoming episodes, I'll be having you on more often. So.
Hey, it's going to be, you know what? I'm going to try to do a little bit more like, I've been doing more, movie analysis and becoming a little bit more of a critic in the fairest sense lately of what I'm watching. So I'd be happy to, sit down and review a movie every once in a while if you want to, or do whatever. It's been great. I really enjoy coming on and talking about this stuff. So.
Well, I enjoy having you. So thank you again for coming on, Donovan. And for everybody else, like this video, subscribe to the channel, ring the darn bell. For heaven's sakes, just ring the bell.
Yes. And just a quick plug.
Yes.
I am my podcasting partner and I, Jordan Crowder. We rebooted our what is it? Is it our third season, I think, of Gentleman Scofflaw podcast?
This is news to me because I used to listen to your show and then I stopped listening because it kind of
fell off the rails. No, we've been doing like quote unquote seasons, and in reality it's just like we'll get together, we'll record a bunch of episodes, and then we're like, oh, we're too busy, we can't. But we're going to be doing it on the regular weekly basis over the next couple months. So if you're into tobacco, alcohol, shaving products, and all sorts of fun shenanigans, there's a place for everybody at the Gentleman Scofflaw podcast. So,
which I will link in the description below, so you guys can go check that out. I think it's Jordan Crowder's YouTube channel, and I think you guys are on iTunes. And
I think so. Yes, we're on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify. I think the only one that we're really not on is SoundCloud, but we're on all that stuff, and we're going to be having more content come out. And who knows, maybe we'll even do some sort of a crossover, and we'll have Kelly on, and we can talk about something.
Hey, that would be fantastic. I can tell you guys how I can't smoke cigars because I have asthma and how I don't drink. But
well, that's fine. You can enlighten us as to what life, the cleaner side of life.
There you go. That's exactly what we'll do.
You'll be our correspondent for the clean stuff of life.
There you go. All right. So everybody, again, that's Jordan Crowder's YouTube channel, and I'll link everything in the description below so people can find it. So thank you again for coming on the show, Donovan, and I will talk to the audience again on the next episode.
Right.